Welcome to Sanity, a podcast by the New York Sun. My name is A.R. Hoffman, and every week, along with my co-host, Rebecca Sugar, we try to make sense out of the nonsense and bring a little bit of sanity to your week.
So, Ari, the quote this week is, again, from Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana.
Amazing.
I can't help myself.
This is becoming a pattern.
I think, we could use him every week. He's so good. So
there's a famous line from our editor-in-chief, Seth Lipsky. It says, 1 is an incident, 2 is a coincidence, and 3 is a trend.
Okay.
So we're at
one
a
away.
Coincidence, yeah.
Senator Kennedy said, quote, Schumer is a wet match in a dark cave. He pulls up there with clubbing baby seals. He's got a 30% approval rating, a 60% disapproval rating, and 10% didn't want to pause their video games to answer the poll call. True again.
The thing about
Kennedy
Senator
for the win.
Kennedy is that he comes off as this kind of like country bumpkin, but he was a Rhodes Scholar
smart,
and is also a brilliant guy.
Yeah, as we said, only someone this smart could be this funny.
No, totally. Okay, so busy week this week. Our top story is going to be the still breaking news over the Epstein files. I have to say this is a story that you were really ahead of, Rebecca. We spoke about this weeks and weeks ago, and you pointed out some of the pitfalls for the president and the White House in this story. We'll also talk about a guest at the White House, now a guest sprayed with cologne, President al-Shara of Syria. Our Make It Make Sense section this week will kind of take the tally of the winners and losers of the government shutdown and try to see where the fallout takes us, as well as, speaking about fallout, the total implosion at the once venerated BBC. And then we actually have the same sunlight story this week, something that grabbed both of us equally, and we'll finish with sunburn. So, Rebecca, this Epstein story is it's almost like the ghost of Jeffrey Epstein. It refuses to go away. The latest was a release of documents from Democrats that showed, that kind of allowed Epstein to speak in his own voice. I think embarrassing for lots of people. Larry Summers doesn't come off looking great at all. And we have some claims about Trump. I mean, Epstein says that Trump was at his house. He says he had dirt on Trump. He says he knows kind of the score. Of course, Virginia Giuffre has denied ever having sex with Trump under oath. But, how do you sort through this? I mean, this is a topic you've cared about for a while and said that there are real dangers here for president's relationship with his MAGA base in this subject. Has that now come to pass, or how do you read this?
Yeah, I think absolutely. That's one really critically important part of this, on the heels of a week in which Trump's sort of MAGA base has been really disappointed in a lot of things he's said and done. To have this come up and then to have the president and his administration continue to say it's all a hoax, it's not a thing, look away. Yeah. It's just not going to work anymore. I would point out, though, that, of course, the Democrats released this at a convenient time when they've been humiliated in the shutdown and need something else to point to. And there were these 23,000 documents. Of course, the Democrats, released 3 of them, not 23,000, just 3,000, and most of those had to do with Trump. So they were deliberately sort of trying to distract and kind of paint Trump as something that I think most of us understand he isn't. Nobody really thinks that Trump had sort of sex with underage girls, because clearly had he done so, the Democrats would have talked about this endlessly before he became president again, not after.
I hear that, but I also think it's fair to say that maybe Trump's claim that he knew nothing about what Epstein is up to is now a little harder to credit.
Yeah, and that's the point, is to kind of to release just enough to make you question all of these people and all of these things. And again, people think of the files, right, as some binder that's going to be released with like a novel, like a spy novel with all these details about people. We'll get some details, we'll get some questions. There might be more questions after we see everything. A lot of it's redacted. But I think the main point is this is like a political game that both sides are playing, right? Representative Burchett came out, I think, this morning and said, I tried to get this up for a unanimous vote, and the Democrats all said no. Of course, he didn't try to do that a week ago. He just tried to do it today. Everybody wants their moment with this. But the bottom line, I think, for the MAGA base, right, is they were promised accountability for the elites. This is a major theme in the America First MAGA crowd, that there's equal justice for all, even if you're the head of a bank or a country or a political figure or a former president. And they want to see some accountability. And Trump's not going to be able to hide from that anymore, no matter who he's protecting. And I don't actually think it's himself.
Of course it's himself, Rebecca.
I don't think it's him.
But look at Occam's razor. Like he's been against releasing these documents, even though Republicans want to. Isn't the simplest explanation is because they implicate him?
No.
Obviously they
explanation,
do. The ones that have been released already do.
Then you have to Occam's razor for me
says,
why the Democrats didn't release that information when they had control, if that were the implication that Trump is implicated.
Well, because this is a MAGA obsession. It's not a Democratic obsession.
No, but a Democratic obsession was keeping Trump from the White House, and connecting him in some disgusting way to Jeffrey Epstein would have been the perfect way to do that, and they didn't do it because that's not there. What probably is there? I mean,
Rebecca. Jeffrey Epstein says, "I have the goods on Trump. He spent hours in my house with a girl." Now you could say he's lying, but if that's not a smoking gun, what is that?
I don't think he's lying. I actually know someone personally who was a close friend of Jeffrey Epstein and went to a lot of his parties. There isn't any part of me that thinks that friend had sex with a girl underage. Yeah. But did he maybe see girls at the party? Did he go to parties where bad things were happening? Yeah. For sure.
Yeah.
Does that mean that he's a pedophile? Of course not. And if the Democrats knew that about Trump, we'd know it by now. So that's not the thing. The thing is something else. It's Trump's donors are implicated. It's some CIA kind of MI5 op that doesn't
listen.
That they don't want to disrupt.
Like I said, that those Summers emails are humiliating. So I have no doubt that lots of people are sort of.
You think Donald Trump had sex with underage girls? And that's in those documents that everyone in Congress has seen.
I don't think that would be in the documents. But the question is Trump's account of his relationship with Epstein being contradicted by and it is. I mean, he has said, I had no idea.
That I agree with, but
that
nobody
was obviously
cares.
a lie.
I personally don't care that of course, if my name were, on some ledger of people who flew on his plane and went to his island, even if I didn't do anything, I wouldn't want that to be known. Of course, I'd cover that up and lie about it. Everybody who's done it has tried to lie about it. I don't even care about that. I care about the abuse of young women. Nobody else seems to care. That is the point here. Nobody's paying the price for having done that. They're all paying some political price, which is so silly. Who cares if you hung out with bad actors who did sort of nefarious
I mean,
things?
there's a spectrum of
girls.
culpability. I mean, I hear that. I just think that, like, I sort of agree with you. I don't think Trump had sex with underage women. But I think the question is why is Trump calling all this a hoax and blocking their release? I mean, that's the question, right?
It's a very good question.
Republicans are now demanding the release. So what do you think it's going to happen?
I think it's going to eventually have to come out because it's just gone too far. And Trump already is in a delicate position with his base. And so he can't keep doing this to his base. But I have to repeat, I don't think the main fall guy here is going to be Donald Trump. I think it's going to be some people we already know, Larry Summers you mentioned, Prince Andrew, Bill Clinton. But there are people whose names we don't yet know who are probably big donors to the Republican Party and the Democratic Party who also didn't want to release this until they did. And nobody wants them to go down. And my Occam's razor is it's just about money and power. And actually, nobody here, if you've noticed, is saying people who raped girls need to pay a price, which is fascinating. It's all about who they can get out of political positions, but it's never about actual justice. Which is why everyone hates Congress in the first place.
Yeah. I just think I want to dial in on something you said. I mean, I do think we're now, Trump came into office pretty triumphant after the election, and there are now some real headwinds. I mean, that we talked about the tariff case is in trouble. I think the Tucker anti-Semitism thing hasn't really gone away.
The H-1B comment
the election results. So this is a tough stretch. I mean, every president faces them.
Yeah, it's a bad week. I call it the America last week for President Trump.
So the question, I think, a little bit here is one of the questions is this MAGA movement, will it stick together? Will it splinter off? Are we getting a look maybe a little bit what happens as Trump becomes more and more of a lame duck, as every second term president does? Where are the fault lines? And it seems to me that we've now seen a couple of them on immigration, on Epstein, on some of the anti-Semitism stuff.
Well, he's gotten, lucky for him, I guess, in the Trump administration. The alarm bells went off with this last set of elections. It told them something about people's dissatisfaction. And I think you already see a small pivot in like the last day. You see a lot more talk out of Trump and Scott Bessent about the economic progress and things, real or imagined. They're selling their economic program much more robustly, and I think they understand that their base is not happy. So there's time still to self-correct.
For sure. I just think that, I think I said it before, you were really ahead of the curve on the political and cultural import of the Epstein files as part of this sort of promise or contract that Trump made with his most loyal 100%. Supporters.
Yeah,
right?
think about all the people who voted for Trump who were, I don't know, their accounts were closed down, their social media accounts were closed down, who were assaulted by Black Lives Matter mobs, who were thrown out of their jobs for not getting a vaccine, who believe that the January 6th protesters were unfairly imprisoned, most of them. All the complaints about the way justice is applied in this country, now they see their America First hero come in. He himself has been abused by the justice system, and he has the opportunity to right a really big wrong where a group of elites abused innocent young girls, and he's not jumping at the chance. That's a major disappointment and a major sense of betrayal. And I think he didn't understand how deep it went. And now the Democrats are the ones leveraging that in the moment that they need to, and he's going to have to contend with it.
Yeah. I mean, we're seeing already Lauren Boebert is saying, I'm sticking with my demand, to release this. So there's a willingness here, I think, because of those deeper loyalties or affinities you mentioned, to, I think, for Republicans to kind of push back on the president on this subject, right? They feel like they have the better of the political support.
But we should all just maybe tamp down our expectations. If we see everything, air quotes, everything won't be everything, because a lot of it will be redacted, and everything that we want to see won't rise to the occasion.
I'm impressed by what we've seen. I mean, we see direct emails between Epstein and crucial figures. I mean, I'm someone actually who poo-pooed all this, and I'm actually surprised at the documentary record that's here.
Right.
I mean, like, if I thought it's going to be random, sort of oblique court records, and I mean, this is a real correspondence, whether it's with Summers or about Trump, or the correspondence we've seen with Leon Blatt, whatever. We need to go into it, but I think there is a record here,
right?
Now, of course, it's not complete. Of course, it's not going to tell you everything. But
then back to your sort of skepticism about who's implicated. Wouldn't what you just said tell you that there is so much more there than you thought? Both the Democrats and the Republicans for 2 cycles now have suppressed it, have not released it to the public. Both of them have something to lose here, obviously. It can't just be that Trump got a back massage by a 16-year-old. There has to be something else that would involve or have an effect on both sides of the aisle.
Well, there are a couple of ways to think about this. For sure, no, I don't doubt that at all. And obviously, this was a targeted release. I mean, one question though: are you at all, from a privacy perspective, which we talk a lot about on this program, are you at all bothered by releasing kind of private emails, that stuff that hasn't been? There's no court case. There's no, I mean, should Larry Summers' emails with Jeffrey Epstein be released to the public? Is there?
Yeah, I mean,
it makes me a little queasy.
It is, and it's one of the arguments that a lot of Republicans have put forward, that why are we doing this? Also, you can see that Larry Summers maybe was a naughty boy, but he didn't do anything criminal or terrible.
No,
it's just humiliating at this point. That is part of it, but I just think that it's probably gone too far. I think that's going to be part of the redacting process and protecting the innocent stuff that Kash Patel has talked about. And it's not to be taken lightly. Like, people, really resent that he has tried to do that and call him, say he's covering up and all that. Yeah. I don't know, maybe he is, but maybe there's also another point to be made, to your point, that people are entitled to not be publicly humiliated for going to parties in the 90s with a guy who had a big house and fun parties.
But, if it came out, which seems to have, I mean, have come out that, that Larry Summers was having an affair or somehow. I mean,
none of my business. Don't care.
Right, but now everyone knows about it, right? And
terrible.
I know him. I know his wife. She was my advisor at Harvard. I mean, I don't know. What do we do with that? I mean,
I don't know,
how do we think through?
Yeah. But at the same time, you sort of think like, well, then we have Jack Smith, who's like, wiretapping members of Congress, and like everybody's invading everybody's privacy. Everyone's trying to leverage it for political gain, and I just feel like who's going to finally get called out on it? It has to stop somewhere. And some innocent people are going to get caught up in the dragnet, I guess, and it's a shame and it's terrible, but I don't know, then do we just let it keep going? Just keep happening? I do think just from a pure, and I totally take your point about, obviously focus should be on the victims and the kind of wreckage, the legacy of catastrophic harm. But I think the White House needs to figure out just politically a little bit how to handle this, as you said, right? They're on the back foot. I think saying it's a Democratic hoax is not really going to work, mostly because President Trump's own base doesn't believe that, right? Like it's one thing if, so I think there has to be some like strategizing here about how do you regain the narrative here, and how do you, and maybe the thing is to do, as you're saying, is to kind of, put a lot out into the public sphere and let those like 1,000 flowers bloom and see who's responsible and who's not. Yeah. There's no good answer, right? There's no good answer. And we don't know what we don't know. Right. We don't know really what is in there that needs to be protected legitimately, right? And so we're talking as though we understand what we're asking to be released, and we don't, right? I mean, I think partially, at least from this, is it's clear that, Epstein had a voluminous email correspondence with a lot of famous figures, and the tone of that correspondence, it seems like, was remarkably frank, right? Which again, I'm just trying to, at the most basic level, what have we seen, right? You always wonder why people write down all the bad things that they do, knowing that it could always be found out later. And then you sort of wonder if that isn't further evidence that he was running some kind of operation to blackmail people because he wanted it all in writing. Why would you have written that down? I don't. Well, really it was clearly a blackmail. I mean, he said about Trump, right? The dog that hasn't barked in Trump, and that I could take him down. It was clearly blackmail. It was clearly, I also think part of it is like you're dealing with generationally older people who are like less savvy. Not to be silly about it, but putting this stuff in email now would be. It is true. 20 years ago, you didn't think everything you ever wrote. I also, and not to take us to the depths of the rabbit hole, the bottom, and we can move on. Oh, go ahead. But I just don't understand the hold this guy had on people. He is demanding of money, his, not having a college degree. The guy was just a true con man. Yes. And these powerful men were just eating out of his hand. Right. I don't know, maybe it says more psychologically, maybe it says more about powerful men than it does about Jeffrey Epstein. I'm sure it does. That Larry Summers, Larry Summers is probably one of the most powerful policymakers in the world. And he was talking to Jeffrey Epstein like he was a freshman rushing a frat. Yeah. And this is like my hedge fund manager theory, pardon. Yeah. Sorry to all my friends who are hedge fund managers who I love, but many of them are sort of those like, grown-up teenage boys who didn't have a lot of luck in high school and used their power and money to kind of go back in time and assert themselves in ways that they couldn't when they were adolescents. It sort of feels that way, but it's a general male thing too, and it's and maybe it's a cultural thing. Like if you're going to, I don't know, do you remember like the 80s and the 90s in New York? Like people were doing all kinds of crazy things that they would probably look back on today in horror, but when everyone's doing it and there's like a cultural acceptance, it doesn't seem as strange, right? There's this idea that, imagine getting on an airplane with your wife and Jeffrey Epstein and a couple of other businessmen and the head of this company and that company, and then some 16-year-old unaccompanied, pretty, kind of half-dressed, is just sitting there, and nobody's child, their parents are not there, and you didn't say, what's that girl doing here? That was sort of like normal in a way back then, and nobody thought to ask, and we all like to think that now we would. I hope we would, but sometimes like things just sort of all bleed together, and Sure. Back to the beginning, like everybody who's in the files is not a monster. Of course. Yeah. Okay, I'm sure there'll be more coming up.
Speaking of monsters or not, Rebecca has a really great column out, but touches on a lot of these issues this week. But one of them is the invitation of al-Shara, the president of Syria, to the White House. And why I like this, Rebecca, was there's a lot of kind of euphoria about Syria now. There's this sense of like, oh, great, they're a better neighbor. Maybe they joined the Abraham Accords. Maybe this sort of optimism. But I thought you had a helpful kind of dose of reality there and a good contrarian take. So what were you thinking seeing Syria's president in the White House?
I guess that's my job, is to throw cold water on all these sort of otherwise positive developments. I mean, look, the argument for developing a relationship with him and bringing him to the White House and lifting the sanctions is that there's a strategic interest that America has in disrupting the alliance that the former President Assad and Syria had with Iran and Russia. And the U.S. Isn't wrong to want to cultivate a relationship with Syria and pull them away from that access. Fair enough, and to engage them in the fight against ISIS. Fine. The problem, of course, there were a few problems. One is that it was not, al-Shara and his party and his group that really did the heavy lifting in terms of defeating ISIS and the caliphate in Syria. It was the Kurds, these poor Kurds who can't catch a break. They really did the work, and they don't get a White House meeting, and they don't get sprayed with Victory 45, 47 cologne. And
because part of this a reconciliation with Syria is also a reconciliation with Turkey.
So, right, it's just always better to be the bad boy and be useful than to be the good boy and not be so useful, I guess, in politics. But so it's more than a pity. It's a shame. But I don't think that's what most Americans were reacting to. I think it was the fact that that President Trump, again, in their eyes, got his eyes on foreign affairs, not on what's happening here in our country. Fair or unfair, that is how the MAGA base viewed it. And, of course, he brings him to the White House. I mean, did nobody pull out their calendar and show him that it was the 250th anniversary of the founding of the Marines? And on that exact day, you bring in an al-Qaeda member who was involved in killing Marines. Bad optics. So if you wanted to piss off the MAGA base and the America First base again, you certainly did. And I just think at the end of the day, there's this basic argument. I hate to sound like Tucker Carlson here, but it's true, right? Al-Jilani is been killing Christians and Druze in Syria in his rise to power. Nobody says a thing. True. Many of the MAGA First base are themselves Christians. So you bring a Christian-killing, Al-Qaeda, Marine-killing guy to the White House and slap him on the back and joke about his 4 wives, potentially. He only has one.
Spray perfume on him, literally and figuratively.
Literally spray your branded perfume on him and then say America First. And the America First crowd is not buying that. And so that was a really bad day. Yeah,
that's a really interesting take. I think one thing is, a lot of second-term presidents start thinking about foreign policy because, that you can do more, it's sexier, it's more unilateral. But I think you're absolutely right to highlight that this would be a real blind spot as you said, I think there's some discussions now for Trump to do a barnstorming tour talking about the economy, and I think they've neglected it, and I think you're starting to see. You can read the affordability obsession as one version of pushback, but certainly as the midterms are now full speed ahead, I think there's a real concern here.
Huge, right?
The eye isn't on the ball.
The other point is, right, in the New York election, the Virginia election that we just went through, there are a lot of reasons why Republicans lost. But, one of them was that just Republican turnout wasn't great in any of these states. I don't know that it would have tipped elections, let's say in New York or whatever, but if the Republican base is not animated, motivated, excited, Donald Trump's not on the ticket, so they're not running to the voting booths for him. He has to give them that America First push to get them to go to the voting booth, and certainly in the midterms. And if he keeps doing this, they will deliberately stay home, and then he's lost. Yeah.
I mean, I think the question of, and maybe we can explore it with someone as a guest in the future, of can Republicans win now without Trump on the ballot becomes a real question, or how does that work?
I think Megyn Kelly says Daddy's not there to help them win.
But I think obviously Trump sees the Middle East. He sees peace in the Middle East as an important part of his agenda,
Yeah. Well, I mean, who wouldn't want to make peace in the Middle East? That's like,
right. That's what he says. It's like it's 1,000. You haven't made peace in 3,000 years.
Right. I mean, one unbelievable label to have on you as you leave office. But he's not going to be able to make peace in the Middle East if he loses in the midterms. He has to focus on domestic issues and on the people that elected him and what they want. Even if you could argue a million ways to Sunday why they're wrong and why these foreign issues actually really do matter to America, and I would make a lot of that argument, but some of the mistakes he made this week were just like not even about actually what he does. It's just the way he frames it and the way he messages to people, and that certainly he needs to change.
Yeah, and I think one way of reading this, some of the divisions on the right we spoke about last week around Carlson, or a charitable reading of them, is to say they are a result of a desire for less American intervention abroad, right? And so maybe saying like, oh, Israel's in control is a crude way of trying to say sort of a version you said much more elegantly and sophisticatedly, that like attention should be at home, right?
Yeah, I think honestly, like Tucker Carlson asks a lot of good questions, some bad ones, but he does ask a lot of good questions. He doesn't get a lot of good answers, and there are good answers. That's the shame of it all. And so that's sort of the space that Trump has to navigate now.
Yeah, I mean, I have my own concerns about the Syria stuff. I mean, I think lifting all the sanctions, as you said, al-Shara is a bad actor. It's not entirely clear that he can even govern the country, that it'll stick together. Israel has taken some territory, over the border. There's going to be pressure to withdraw if there's some kind of agreement. I don't love that. I think there's a real concern here. Israel has had to sort of expand its territory to protect some of the Druze communities because there have been such rampaging violence aided and abetted by the government.
Yeah, and interestingly, right, as he sits with Donald Trump in the Oval Office, Donald Trump, who affirmed that the Golan Heights are Israeli territory, Jolani, which was his adopted name, which literally means from the Golan, sat there and said, well, I don't know if I'm going to negotiate with Israel. So there goes his Mideast peace plan. And by the way, like the Golan Heights are occupied territory to the man who designated them as not occupied territory. Like how serious of a player is he in this Middle East peace thing? Even in that moment, he couldn't get on board. It's a little concerning.
Yeah. Trust him as far as you can throw him, kind of thing. Let's touch briefly on the BBC here. Sort of, I'd say, a pretty surprising resignation of the director and another senior figure. I think there are lots of ways to attack this. I mean, one is,
let's just say quickly what happened.
It was a maliciously or edited video of Trump's January 6th speech that took out the peaceful protests. And that came to light. Obviously, Trump was horrified and says he's going to sue for $1 billion. But putting aside the Trump suit, I mean, there's just a huge credibility problem here. It also has come to light virtually at the same time that the BBC has had to issue 215 corrections over their coverage of the Israel war with Gaza. And I haven't seen a breakdown, but I can guarantee which way they all went. That's about 2 a week. I mean, if we had to issue that many corrections, we'd be out of business. Yeah. I mean, you can't. What
is a normal number of corrections per week?
Well, you'd have some corrections, but they're always in good faith, and you
wouldn't always be on the same topic.
Wouldn't be on this right exactly. And they're actually it's today's day and age of it's easy enough to like look stuff up, double check. I mean, BBC has no shortage of personnel and fact checkers. They're not a shoestring operation. Yeah. So this all tells you that this is an enterprise that had gone so off the rails and been ideologically warped.
Yeah.
And it hurts me to say, I there is a version of the BBC that is excellent, and it's not every piece of work they do. It's not every reporter. But something at the upper levels here and on the ground has really gone off the rails.
Yeah, I think part of the scandal to me is that British citizens pay for the BBC in part, right? A certain percentage of every television purchased in the UK goes to supporting the BBC. And sort of in a world of 1 million media channels, there's no excuse for that anymore. You should be forced to pay for this stuff too. But I wonder also, why do you think that these resignations happen now? I mean, this has been going on for a long time. Everybody knows that these papers, these news outlets are biased. There's There's been a lot of reporting about the bias. Why would they resign now?
It was very strange. I don't know a ton of the inside baseball. I mean, obviously, anytime you have something that touches on the American president, there's going to be more scrutiny.
This American president,
and
they
more
just
scrutiny.
fear Trump.
I think they fear Trump. I think it was a very visible sort of and very clumsy, as these things often are, sort of maneuver.
Do you think they'll issue the apology before he sues them for $1 billion?
I think they'll issue an official apology. But we had an editorial basically saying, the Trump news is obviously the big one, but the coverage of Israel has been deeply dishonest.
Yes,
really deeply dishonest.
Right. Shocking no one at all.
Yeah, and
but do you think it shocks people?
I think this stuff is so ideologically driven. I think there are a lot of people who probably think the BBC is pro-Israel. I mean, which is insane. But I just think we're in the it's like through the looking glass. I mean, it's really like a funhouse carnival of bias and preconceived notions.
Yeah.
I don't even think they can find their way out of it. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's we've spoken about it. We've interviewed, Liz Truss. We interviewed Ben Habib. I mean, the problems in England around go so deep.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So just read the New York Sun instead.
You read the New York Sun, and our friends, the Telegraph, did really good reporting on this to bring it to light. But just to say, I mean, if you're issuing 2 corrections a week on the same subject, you're doing something wrong, and I don't know. I
didn't look at the BBC's own reporting about this BBC scandal. Did you?
I haven't. No.
I wonder what they're saying to themselves and to their audience.
Yeah. I mean, there's a really excellent tradition of English news and journalists, and I just hope it can kind of somehow like course correct and go back to that, of really intrepid, brave, truth telling. That's part of the gloriousness of the English press, and the BBC is it's flushed its credibility away on this Israel subject, and on Trump, but.
I guess it's just sort of right. We've said versions of this kind of thing before, but when you're so fixated on one subject and so angry about it, when you have Trump derangement syndrome, for example, and you really can't see him clearly, or Israel derangement syndrome, it could mess with even the soundest mind. It made me think of like Sam Harris, who's somebody I don't agree with on many things, but is always sort of reasonable and level-headed, and then, right, famously supported the idea that the censorship of the Hunter Biden laptop story was completely legitimate if it would just keep Donald Trump out of office, right? So in just one area, his brain can be triggered to such a degree that he no longer thinks in a straight line, and so I think it could happen to anybody. And it becomes part of the culture. It's like you say it so naturally because you just assume everyone else feels the same way. And I'm sure that was like in that bubble of the BBC, like probably nobody even noticed they were taking the Gaza Health Ministry's, reporting seriously.
Totally. I think you're absolutely right. I think at some point it stops being like a decision on the facts and just becomes like where your Overton window is. Like you just can't imagine, another not another truth, but you're not open to where the facts lead you.
Yeah.
You're the opposite.
Okay, let's talk about German Christmas markets.
Okay, let's talk about
shared sunlight. I'm so excited for this.
So this is actually, it's sad. I mean, so basically, I think we both were affected by this story, 2 Jews in a Christmas market.
Yes.
And that is that Germany, the city of Magdeburg, which is where that awful terrorist attack last year was, where a Saudi doctor killed 6 people and injured 338, drove into them at this Christmas market. He's on trial now. They canceled their Christmas market this year. They couldn't pay for security. They couldn't take the risk. But not just them. I saw some reporting that throughout Germany, Christmas markets have been canceled. And let me just read a quote, and then I'll throw it over to you. This is from the mayor of Magdeburg, Simone Boris, who says, if holding a Christmas market is considered creating a potential terror threat, then every city festival becomes a source of threat.
Yeah.
Right. And Germany is of course known for these lovely, gorgeous Christmas markets.
Right.
They've been doing them since the Middle Ages. But,
yeah, that really, to me, that is the point. And it's not about every other festival, actually. It's about the fact that these are Christmas markets that hit home for me. This is such a tradition in Christian Western Europe for hundreds of years, really, as you point out. And it is such a mark of Western civilization. And for that to be the target, as it's been in other Christian, Christmas markets around Europe, by Islamists generally, is the point. And then the reaction is the point too, that they should be closed down in response, is precisely why they were attacked in the first place. It's working, and we are dismantling our own civilization to accommodate people who hate our civilization out of fear. It's the entire definition of terrorism, actually, and I hate that we're falling for it. And if you've noticed, the right here in New York, the Rockefeller tree lighting every year is like this big spectacle. When I was a girl, my father actually had an office in that building, and so I was there every year. You could walk up, practically touch the tree. I mean, not entirely, but you could literally get that close. It was so beautiful. It was so wonderful. Everybody was just like in that Christmas mood. It was like actually like a Hallmark movie. And today, you're like blocked off for 3 blocks on either side. Traffic is insane. Nobody wants to be in that area during that time. You can maybe like be 3 blocks away and look out a window and see the tree. We've actually like allowed this sort of anti-American Islamist mob to dismantle our traditions, to take down our culture and our civilization, and we're accommodating it by just building like walls and putting fences up, and
or not even bothering in this case. They just said we
took
can't.
It to the next
we're
level.
not even going to bother.
It's
tragic. It's tragic. It's tragic. I mean, Christmas. You think about what was the point of Christmas markets? It was community. Darkness and a light in a dark time of year. And who knows if most of the people go if they're religious or not, but the point is there's social cohesion, social trust, the idea of buying a treat of kind of like wholesome. I mean,
culture.
It's
our culture.
It's culture, especially in Germany, especially in Europe. I mean, these were seen as one of the few, I think, like legitimate or sort of expressions of a pre-modern, or pre-contemporary culture. Right. And to just give up just seems to me so sad.
And worse than that, right? This week also in Germany, several banks started debanking members of the AfD, the party that is number 1 in the polls there, that they keep suppressing, and which is the most vocal about their migration problem. Yeah. So God forbid you even are in Germany and say out loud that this is unacceptable to close down our Christmas markets.
Well, this is
shut down your bank account.
a huge boost to the AfD, I'd imagine, as these things often are. I mean, if I'm someone who, this is a highlight of my year and my town is going dark. Yeah. And again, it's we just passed the anniversary of the 2015 terror attacks in Paris. At the Bataclan there, and I think Europe. How many times can we say it? But needs to stiffen up a little bit. 100%. I mean, not to say but there's a reason why the motto after October 7th in Israel is "We will dance again." I mean, the important thing is to not yield. And however much security you need. Do it.
And the important thing is for us in America not to think of this as like, oh, those poor Europeans, they just, they're falling under the weight of the problem that they created, is to recognize that we have the potential for a problem here too. There's a lot going on here in terms of, we talked about, I think, a couple of weeks ago in Texas, the number of mosques going up, the Sharia compliant city they tried to build, which the governor there just squashed with legislation that they won't tolerate Sharia law dominating in any area of Texas. But we have that same impulse here too, and not just from Islamists, from Antifa and from the far left, who want to dismantle our culture, dismantle like sort of the underlying Christian, Judeo-Christian values that animate this country, and mostly without thinking about it, we've just sort of accommodated it and hired more policemen and put it behind a wall. And that's not the answer, right? We have to reassert our culture and remember that we have a culture. Yeah,
for sure. There's some maybe a little bit shoots of sunlight in that the Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, said, Syria is no longer it's no longer a civil war. We're not going to take asylum claims anymore. People are maybe getting encouraged to go back, but it's too little, too late. I mean,
Right.
Germany took in a million
Yeah.
people, most of them men,
Yes.
young men. So, but okay, that's done. The question now is, do they have the courage to kind of defend their joy and defend their and to me, this is something that, like, Germany is a very successful country, a very organized, efficient country. It knows how to solve problems and, figure it out.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
federal government should dispatch, I just saw that they're reinstituting a draft in Germany in some form. I think, this is slowly maybe happening, but, dispatch the army and say, we're going to guard this
Right.
Christmas
But that's
festival.
just a matter of will, and
It's a matter
clearly
of
they
will.
don't have it, and
Yeah.
that is the sad part of this whole story, is that they don't have it. And I think if Christmas itself isn't going to
Right.
bring it out in people, I'm just not sure what will.
Right.
And like, what's German for Scrooge? I don't know.
Okay, so my sunburn, this is going to be about Zohran Mamdani. The New Yorker devoted the entire talk of the town this week to Mamdani's election. It was written by Eric Latch, who's been their Mamdani chronicler. And it was suitably ecstatic and hagiographic, right, and sort of laudatory of the mayor-elect. That was all sort of, expected. But there was one line in that, it really shocked me. I don't often get shocked when I'm reading something. And I was reading it on the train, and this is the reporter writing, Eric Latch, and he says that Mamdani called me a few days after October 7th, worried about Islamophobic backlash. I mean, the idea that front of mind was Islamophobic backlash after the worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust is just, it tells you everything you need to know about where Mamdani's heart is, where his head is, and where his agenda is.
Maybe how he got elected.
And maybe how he got elected. The selfishness of that, right? We talk about living in a multicultural city. We talk about caring for people of different backgrounds. The selfishness that your first instinct is to worry about backlash when, bodies are still, bleeding and houses are still burning. It's a total absence of kindness towards a community that was still reeling. And this is reaction to October 7th. And in other forum, he's exhibited the same lack of compassion, lack of care. And it means when you're truly invisible, this is sort of what it feels like, worried about the Islamophobic backlash.
Right. And just,
First instinct, first reaction to a reporter.
Note to Mamdani, like when there's backlash against him, when everything that he does fails, as it likely will, he should note that it's not because he's a Muslim, it's because he's terribly bad at what he does and has terrible ideas. Just in case he wants to come out later and, say that it was all because he was a Muslim that we didn't reelect him, or that we all pointed out all his flaws, he should note that, no, it's just because you're incompetent and not particularly bright. Yeah.
Okay.
My sunburn, just quickly, is the Dave Portnoy pizza anti-Semitism story. Dave Portnoy was in Mississippi, near Mississippi State University, and a 20-year-old kid kind of walked by while he was on camera and threw some pennies on the ground towards him and made some anti-Semitic slurs toward him. It was a whole, moment. It went viral. And then the next thing you know, you see this kid, he has a mugshot. He was arrested for disturbing the peace. And interesting, so there are two sunburns here. First of all, I hope this 20-year-old's mother, pulled him by the ear and screamed at him for being stupid and saying anti-Semitic things, and just how awful the behavior, of course, is just terrible. But I just wanted to say that, seeing a mugshot of this kid also made me feel like that's also terrible. We don't, he did say something stupid. He did throw an object at a person, which technically under the law, but if you watch the video, he threw it like on the ground. It was sort of symbolic, like, you Jew with all your money. We all get it. He's an idiot, but we don't put idiots, in jail. He didn't go to jail. He got out on bail. But, at the end of the day, this is not the way to combat anti-Semitism. I would have been happier if Dave Portnoy just punched him in the face and taught him a lesson. Like, that's the way it would have been in the old days, and that would have been good enough. I don't know this kid. Nobody knows this kid. Nobody knows if he's an anti-Semite or not. Yeah. He said something stupid and childish. He wanted a moment. It didn't go the right way for him. To pursue it with legal means and to start spreading it everywhere and calling it the great fight against anti-Semitism is also foolish. And we have bigger fish to fry than that. Yeah. And I just hope he's grounded. He's a kid. Yeah. He's a kid. It's not an excuse for what he said or what he did. If that were my kid, I'd be horrified and humiliated that I raised such a person. It's all terrible, but it's not a national issue, and it's certainly not an issue that American Jews should have hair on fire about.
Yeah. We've spoken about this, and it is another issue that I think you're really at the forefront thing about, Rebecca, is the limits of using the law, to kind of stamp out prejudice, and what are the trade-offs to doing that. One thing I've always been impressed with is the story. Remember when Prince Harry wore the Nazi uniform at a Halloween party? It wasn't much reported, but I heard someone told me this, that his father, King Charles, sent him for a couple hours to Rabbi Jonathan Sacks's house to just talk about the history of anti-Semitism, talk about Jews, talk about what that meant. And I just love that. It was a sense of kind of like, this is actually, this is how you address this kind of thing.
Yeah. And also, can I just make one last point? Interestingly, because I was talking about this with a friend yesterday, and her first reaction was, but Rebecca, what would you say if that were a black guy, Dave Portnoy, and somebody screamed the N-word at him and threw a watermelon on the floor? And I would say the same thing, which is, that's disgusting and you should be embarrassed by that behavior, but you wouldn't jail the person. But
or if someone throws a Subway sandwich at someone, right? I think these things we should kind of let.
But her expectation actually was that, in some sense, that would be actionable, because we've been so trained in this country especially on the race issue, where every microaggression, air quotes, is a thing, and you have to make it a civil liberties thing and everything, and it downgrades the entire conversation, is what I'm saying. And so stick to the things that really matter and try to sort through them appropriately.
Yeah. I worry that I worry though that someone could feel comfortable screaming, fuck the Jews on camera. I mean,
it's all bad, but I don't know that I see an indicator of the KKK marching down the street tomorrow because of it.
Yeah. The stuff has always been there. All right.
Good to see you.
We'll see you next week.